Food Fix is really because I want to create a roadmap for how do we address all these things in a coherent way on a national level to change the trajectory of what's happening. Because I believe that the single biggest threat we have is not terrorism. I mean, it's not the opioid epidemic. I mean, that's a real thing, right? There's 70,000 people that die every year. There's 700,000 people that die every year from food we're eating. Nobody's talking about a national emergency for that, but it should be. So eat food and vote and do all the things you can do to make a difference. I hope I haven't depressed you too much, but I think there is a hopeful message of calling these things out, bringing awareness, and changing the trajectory of what's happening. And we all have the power to do that as individuals, as healthcare leaders, as citizens. So thank you, and I'm here for questions for a few minutes if you want. Any questions? Comments? Compliments? No? Yeah.
So what's confusing to me as a consumer with all this, I have most of your book, so I am reading and trying to understand it all, and I get what you're saying. But if all the studies are being sponsored by, not all, many studies are being sponsored by these food industries, and there are so few studies, it sounds like, that are legitimate scientific studies, and it's even hard to do a good study anyway, and there's not a lot of money. So I get it's easy to say all the negatives. So how do we know that what you're promoting, besides common sense, which it is actually scientifically,
What I'm promoting?
Well, just all, like what you say you should do. Like if there aren't that many studies, how are you coming to that?
Well, it's a combination of things. You look at basic science, you look at RCTs, you look at observational. You kind of look at the complexity of all of it. You look at that combined with common sense and historical history of eating. I mean, why would it make sense that we would invent a new food and consume 1,000 times more of that and that be okay from an evolutionary perspective? So there's things like, for example, soybean oil didn't exist 100 years ago plus, and now it's 10% of our calories and it's a 1,000-fold increase. So I think it's a combination of all those things, and it's also, I think newer studies are going to be very interesting. At Cleveland Clinic, we're looking at how do we look at very advanced testing around genomics and gene expression, biomarker studies, patterns of inflammation, microbiome in response to food as medicine. So we'll be able to actually begin to tease these things out. I think we're not that far from understanding consensus about what we should be eating. Nobody says we should be adding more pesticides or butylated hydroxytoluene to our food. No one thinks we should be eating, 150 pounds of sugar a year. No, everybody knows we should be eating more fruits and vegetables and whole foods. Like, there's no controversy about any of that. The data all support that. The question is, should it be, paleo? Should it be vegan? Should it be high fat, low fat? There are questions in there, but it's just a lot of it has to do with just looking at all of it and coming up with what sort of makes the most sense given what we know. And I think, and then again, looking at how to analyze the studies and follow the money and look at the data. So it's not just one study; it's all of the data combined. And there's a lot of data out there, and not all of it's bad. I'm just saying that we have to be aware when we see these headlines to be suspicious.
Thank you.
Hi. A year ago, I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and I'm a chef. Came out of nowhere. I went back in the kitchen. I started healing through food, but I also healed through food, mind, body, and soul. What do you do at Cleveland Clinic with patients who have type 1 diabetes?
Are you asking, do we address the mind, body, and soul part, or are you asking just what do we do?
Anything. Tell me anything you got.
Well, it's interesting. I have a friend who's a doctor, and she was like you. She was 40-something and got type 1 diabetes.
Not 40.
What?
Not 40.
No, I'm just saying. She was, she wasn't like 8 years old, right?
Okay.
And she decided she's kind of a science geek, a tech geek, and she kind of got the continuous glucose monitor. She rigged up an insulin pump and programmed it and did all this stuff. Basically, she found that she went on a keto diet. Her A1C was like 4.8. She did really well and needed a couple units of insulin a day. She's now doing vegan keto because she had gastroparesis for some reason from a virus, and it was harder to digest meat. And she found she was able to do it on that as well and use a couple units of insulin, which for those who know what that is, I mean, normally you need 20 to 30 units of insulin a day to manage your sugar. So I think there was a group that she was part of. There was a data published through David Ludwig and her showing this case series of people who were in this online community in type 1 diabetes who used very, very low carbohydrate diets. So I think the question is, how do you find the right balance for you and what you're doing? At this point, there's no cure for it. It's an autoimmune disease. About 29% of people with type 1 have also celiac. Many of them are undiagnosed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I love your work and the fact that you're now using your platform as well for food activism. One thing that I've been a little disconcerted with, I think it was a solid effort, is that recently there's now a requirement for added sugars to be on food labels. But unfortunately, that does not include like apple juice concentrate or coconut nectar or these kind of natural sugars. I'm not sure if you already addressed this as I came in the middle of your talk, but I hope that's something that you'll potentially talk about in your book, because just the other day I bought, a pre-bottled matcha latte that said no added sugars, and that includes 0 grams added sugars on the nutrition label, and then right in the ingredients it said coconut nectar, and I tasted it and it was very sweet.
Yeah.
And of course the total sugars were like 15 grams on the label.
Yeah.
And none of those were naturally occurring from matcha or from the almond cream that was in
Right.
it. So,
It's
that's
true.
a huge concern.
Even health
misleading.
food companies and people making natural products, it's tricky, and they're slipping in things like erythritol and stevia, and those things may not also be that great for you. So
Yeah, certainly. I figured, especially with those concentrates, like the apple juice concentrate, the amount of fructose, that's almost pure fructose, right?
Yeah.
That's
No,
being
true.
added
True.
without the nutrients. So I was
You're-
wondering if
you're
that's
right.
something you might
You're
address
right. You're
in
right.
your book. Possibly.
you just have to be aware of looking at not just the front of the label, but the back and the nutrition facts and how much sugar and how much what the ingredients are.
Right.
It's shocking to me. I go buy green juice and I turn over, it's like more sugar than a can of Coke.
Right.
And I'm like, well, this is maybe a little more phytonutrients and fiber, but it's still not a health food.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I want to thank you for your work. I'm a nutritionist in Bethesda, Maryland, and I also volunteer at a clinic for very low-income people. 90% of them are Spanish-speaking. Of those, most are Central Americans who've literally walked out of their countries.
Yeah.
So it's a very challenging population. But when I ask them, when did your real health problems start? It's really amazing when they got to the United
Oh,
States, not in their countries where they were literally had very little to eat. So the biggest
What they had
message,
to eat was real food, right?
that's right. So the biggest message I give to them is, please, what did you eat in your country? Beans, rice, some avocados. And that's what I try to encourage them to do.
Yeah.
Like nothing, no processed foods from this country. Really try to focus on what
Yeah,
you
that's
ate
great advice.
in your country.
Right. Well, it's not a
Yeah.
new story. You look at this has been told in science for decades that people who move from Japan, the United States, they get the same rates of heart disease. Polish women who eat 30 pounds of sauerkraut in Poland move to America, they stop eating that, and they all get breast cancer. It's fascinating. You look at the data. So it really is not so much only the genetics, it's also what they're eating. Yeah.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for doing the right thing. I got very sick. I used to travel with the Children's Foundation all over the world, and I came back from a healthy white count of 7 to a 2. And Mayo told me it had nothing to do with nutrition. This is in 1989. So I stumbled around until I found a guy called a healer. And he basically said, eat everything nature created, stay away from man-made, which is
Yeah.
what you do.
Yeah,
And when
pretty
you
much.
showed up, you confirmed it all, which means that now I'm going to be 66 tomorrow. And I got my focus back, I got my health back, I got everything, and it was all based on nutrition.
It's
Thank
true.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, I often teach at churches, and I say, it's really easy to figure out what to eat. Leave the food that man made and eat the food that God made. Or if Jesus came to dinner, what would you feed him?
Hi,
Big
Mark.
Mac and fries or Whole Foods?
So thank you for everything you do, and I agree with everything you say. I'm a nurse practitioner in the Bronx. What do I tell my patients that can't afford organic and grass-fed and wild, and maybe
Yeah,
not even?
so that's fair. I mean, I think eventually things will come down in price as that scales up, but you know, there's a hierarchy of priorities, right?